Welcome to my Books That Young Men Should Read series. This is a series where I recommend books that young men in their teens going into their early to mid-20s should be reading. Today we're going to be talking about Babel by R.F. Kuang. Now you're probably going to be saying, oh, Babel by R.F. Kuang, that's a pretty popular book. Why are you recommending that? One, let's be honest, statistically, men and boys do not make up the majority of fiction readers. Even myself, for example, only really started getting back into reading fiction over the past 12 to 18 months. So it is important that these guys read fiction, and also this book is actually just good. It's like genuinely a good read, and an important read, and most importantly, it's modern. So it's a little bit easier to get into. Ooh, me from the future. The next book in this series is going to be a non-fiction book, because I do think there are important non-fiction books you should be reading, even if you might not fully understand them. So next book, non-fiction. It's important. Babel by R.F. Kuang is what I would call a historical fantasy book. It is set in 19th century Oxford with a twist. There is magic. Magic is tied to words and language. And through that, people, or at least very much England, are able to access magic or, special powers through the use of words. And Babel follows a group of students from around the world who live in Oxford, and they are tasked with helping Oxford discover new words that can help create this magic and make it more ubiquitous. That's a very brief description of it. It's very difficult to kind of explain it without going to a lot of depth, but take that as the jumping in point. So if you are interested in history, I think that'd be a good way to get into this. If you're interested in fantasy, that would also be a good way to get into this book. Now, why am I recommending Babel? It's because it covers a few key topics I think are very important right now. They're covering history, colonialism, I guess that relates to history, activism, and revolution. All four of these topics are actually topics I think are very important right now, considering the political climate of the world, and also I think it's something that young men kind of are interested in, but are sometimes turned away from. Now, am I advocating for you to go out and start a revolution? Maybe you should get involved with stuff like that. But if you're in school, that might be a little bit difficult for you. But I think this book gives you some interesting context and some interesting understanding of colonialism, of revolution, and of liberation, and all the groups that are involved in those sort of things. Now, a lot of young men who are interested in history unfortunately fall into this rabbit hole that is ubiquitous on places like YouTube that suggest to them that stuff like colonialism, that was a good thing, that they should support colonialism, that the idea of colonialism is something that is in the past, it doesn't happen anymore, but it was an overall good for the world. That is not the truth. Colonialism led to the proliferation of wealth in a concentrated population, and even within that population, an even more concentrated group in that population. Britain became wealthier, but even through Britain becoming more wealthy, all of that wealth was concentrated in a small selection of people. General living standards in Britain did increase, so the entire population benefited. So the entire population can say they benefited from colonialism, but there was specific capitalist structure that benefited even more than the general population. The general population was still exploited by those capitalists, but the general population also benefited from the exploitation of the people that were colonized. Are you following what I'm saying? So, colonialism is a big part of this book, because there are people from around the world who are brought into Britain who are exploited for their talents in language, and through that exploitation they are used to help benefit the capitalist structure within Britain. There are still people in this book who are British who are being exploited by the capitalist structure, and they come in later in the book, but those people still in a way benefited from the exploitation of our main character, his friends, and the people from their homelands. In my opinion, this book very much explains this out for you fairly easily, because the characters within this book are also first-hand understanding that exploitation. They are, through themselves, understanding the consequences of colonialism and how they are forced, in some instances, to play a part in that, and how they can break free of continuing to play a part in that colonialism. Moving on to revolution and liberation. So, within this book, there are revolutionary and liberation groups. I think it's quite important for young men to understand that given our current political climate, you will probably be hearing discussion of the need for a revolution, the need for liberation of the masses, and within this book, there are groups that are fighting for revolution and liberation. Is this a perfect demonstration of sort of a revolution? Probably not. At the end of the day, this is a historical fantasy fiction novel. Revolutionary groups are very different. You will have revolutionary groups who believe in different things and different ways of going about it. However, you do sort of get a look at what a revolutionary group may look like. Is this like me saying, read the Hunger Games, you see a revolutionary group? Well, I guess technically you are seeing a revolutionary struggle in the Hunger Games, but I think this book gives you more of a small scale look of that. It gives you more of the interpersonal weavings that you'll have if you were to join a revolutionary group. And me saying revolutionary group, it doesn't mean I'm saying, okay, you're going to go out there and become Che Guevara or Fidel Castro, doing activism, fighting for liberation. It doesn't necessarily need to be you joining a guerrilla army. I'm not your dad. I can't tell you if you should or shouldn't. I'm sorry. YouTube, listen, okay? I'm just talking to the people. I'm just talking to them.
Let me speak to the people, Piccolo. Let me speak. No one's stopping you. They need to hear this. 30. They need to hear this.
But within this book, you'll see how at least this specific brand of revolutionary group, I'd call them like an underground guerrilla or anarchist group, how they operate, the different structures within it. They aren't perfect. There are flaws within the structure that they demonstrate in this, which I think is something that also when you're young, you kind of see these revolutionaries and you idolize them, but you don't understand that there's a lot of stuff going around in the background. There's a YouTuber on here that I quite like, Prince Shakur, I hope I'm getting the name right. He's actually putting out a series of how to get involved in activism and revolution, and it's a far more real understanding of, activism, revolution, liberation, getting involved in those sort of things. That's more the real life stuff. You should check out his series. I've been watching it. I found it very interesting and very informative, even at my ripe old age. So check stuff out like that. This book obviously is not the perfect example of that, because once again, it is a fiction book. However, you kind of see people going through a revolutionary and liberatory struggle, and even the fighting within that people have when they don't share the same ideology or they don't share the same tactics they want to do throughout their liberation struggle. So I think it's good to sort of understand that and see that throughout this book. The book also discusses race and race relations. Obviously, this is about a group of characters who have been pulled from around the world and brought into Oxford in the 19th century. So obviously, there is going to be some racism stuff at play here, unfortunately. However, you kind of get the understanding of, the characters learning that the racism doesn't make sense and that it's wrong, Obviously, set in the 19th century, you're still going to have many of the English characters who will hold on to those prejudices. But that's also something that's important. I think even now in the 21st century, in the big old 2025, I think still we are ingrained with unconscious biases, as the HR department like to tell you, or just inherent racism that is inside our structure and our country, and it's something that you maybe as a young man experience in school or see happen in school, and it's played off as a joke. The same things were the things that were said in the 19th century. It's played off as light banter and a light joke, but it's genuinely harmful. And the characters discuss this, or you see the characters' feelings after experiencing this, and I think it's important that you as a young man, you kind of understand these words actually mean things. And even if this is your mate you're saying these things to, your mate might just not want to tell you. If you're saying something that is construed as racist, your friend might not say it to you because they don't want to come across as like the nerd who gets upset by jokes. But jokes are only jokes if they make sense and are funny. Racism's not funny. And like, one of the key tenets of humor is you punch up, you don't punch down. And racism is punching down. And finally, I want to touch on our main character, Robin Swift. Robin is the age of the target audience of this video. He is a teenager. He's gone to Oxford University a little bit early because, his proficiency with the Chinese language. So I would like you guys to kind of see what Robin's going through. He kind of goes through the same sort of emotions you guys are. He's blinded by the wonder and the spectacle of the UK, the magic, the kind of the big things he's seeing around him. And oftentimes I think young men are blinded by the spectacle of riches, of money, of these Lamborghini riding fellas who clearly do not own those Lamborghinis. And then he is actually awakened to the harsh reality of what is going on, the exploitation that is going on. And I think this is something that, I don't know what age you hit this. Some people never actually reach this, which is actually quite depressing. But you kind of reach the point where you experience enough of life and you realize, oh, all of this stuff sucks. All the exploitation that results in this sucks. And I think Robin kind of gets a speed run of all of that throughout this book. And, you as a young person, similar age to him, might kind of understand that better if you see it through a character of your age. So I think that's another great benefit of having a sort of teenage-ish character in the book. And just to wrap up, I want to give a little bit of side notes about the book. Throughout the book, you will see footnotes. Such a bad way of doing it, but for example, there's a footnote here. For this, it kind of does go a lot into the different languages being discussed. The characters not only are proficient in their, native language, but they have to be proficient in other languages from around the world. So there is some explanation of the words because the characters, it makes sense that they all already know these words, but us as the reader probably don't, so it's actually quite useful. Furthermore, you will see some people review this and be like, it just felt preachy. I'll be honest, a lot of the people who gave those reviews, I went and read their reviews or I watched their reviews. These were people who were used to reading fantasy books that didn't challenge expectations, that didn't challenge authority or power. These were people who were used to reading kind of these light-hearted medieval style fantasies where the biggest challenge of authority you would have is there is an evil king who is being mean to the citizens, and just getting rid of him will fix all the problems. Nothing else needs to change. You just need to put a good king in their place. Those are the kind of people who were criticizing this book. I think it's because this book was marketed as like this, modern dark academia, high fantasy type deal, when in actuality it's not that. It is a genuine study of historical instances of colonialism with fantasy thrown in there, and I just think it's It's the suffering of this TikTok marketing we see, where everything needs to be marketed as a trope, everything needs to be marketed as a short genre explanation, and then you move on. You get the short clips, you get the nice covers, and I think, you know, consumerism is the fault for that, but that's another video, and I don't want to bombard you guys with too many things. So I do say, don't look at reviews for this book before you read it if you are interested with what I said thus far. What I've said thus far I don't think counts as a review, because there are things that I could like critique in this, but I'm kind of giving an explanation as to why you should read the book. I guess that's a review, but you know, I didn't go into the story too deep. I did actually, but you should read this book without actually thinking people's opinions. Like, I don't think I've given my opinion on this book because I don't think it's perfect, but I do think there are aspects of it that are important for you to read this book and the lessons you can learn from this book, if that makes sense to you. So go now, read this book. And as always with this series, you don't need to be a young man to read this book. This is mostly just because that is the kind of audience I need to start reading these books to help them in these tough political times we are seeing in the world. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna give a big shout out to my members. My members get additional content. They get a say in what content I make. They get special badges, they get special emojis, they get videos early. It's awesome. If you're interested, you can click the join button below this video or on my channel page. It's £2 a month if you're interested. If not, that's a-okay. You reaching this part of the video is great to see anyway. You can pick up Babel from the description down below from bookshop.org. Bookshop.org is a company that works with small independent booksellers to get them a little bit of a kickback whenever you buy a book through them. Alternatively, I highly encourage you to go to your local library, especially for the US. You need to start frequenting your libraries. It is imperative. Thank you for watching, and I hope you read a great book today.